Hello and welcome back to Liquid New Hampshire. I have on today my guest James O'Keefe. This is not that James O'Keefe. This is James O'Keefe of the Massachussetts Pirate Party to talk a little bit about pirate party politics and what it means to be a pirate. How you doing today, James?
I'm well, Dominic. Thank you for having me on.
Well, first questions first. What is the Pirate Party?
So the Pirate Party was founded early in the 2010s in Sweden, out of a variety of stuff, but out of um, the file sharing issues with they gained notoriety when the Swedish government, at the behest of American movie and other, well, especially American movie companies, um, went and cracked down on the Pirate Bay. And they had been started sometime before then, but they gained a lot of attention as a result of that. And it was founded as a political party that focused on um, making it possible for us to share the culture that we all use. No one should go to jail because they're file sharing. And then other aspects of fighting against corporate and government surveillance, issues in terms of, you know, in terms of not using patents to limit how we can innovate, such that some people can go and have a monopoly on a particular process that others can't use, and that prevents innovation. So those are kind of the three core issues. And then it's spread throughout the world, largely in Europe, but there are pirate parties in the Americas, there are pirate parties in Asia and other continents. Australia, for one, has a very active pirate party. And so even here in the United States, and so when I had found out about it, when the Swedish pirates joined the European Parliament with their first one and then two seats when they expanded the size of the European Parliament, that kind of got my attention. And finding the Pirate Party, I found some other folks in Massachusetts, and we started it up here.
That's great. I especially think right now, during the pandemic, it's surprising that I didn't see more conversation about intellectual property, given so many of those vaccines were patented. I didn't feel like I heard much of an organized criticism as much as I thought I would of the patent regime during the pandemic.
I mean, in the Boston area, there was a very active effort to get Monsanto, which is headquartered in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There were a
Oh,
wide variety of protests, of which we were involved, to get Monsanto, their funding for their vaccine was government funded, and yet we've spent all the money either in the research or in giving them monetary commitments ahead of time so that they can scale up production. We, in essence, paid for that vaccine. There was really no reason we should let one company uh, limit the technology there, and it should not, and that prevented from being widely distributed throughout the world, and indeed widely produced throughout the world, not simply under uh but not simply at Monsanto facilities.
right. So it's kind of what a libertarian might call, corporatism, where the government is funding it, right? The government is putting money into it, but then we have this intellectual property regime that makes sure that private companies reap the benefits rather than the general public.
I mean, that's exactly what happens, where we have the federal government will go and fund research and then in essence hand over the technology to to private companies to then go and market and distribute it. There's no reason to do that. We could make it available to a wide variety of companies so there's competition for who can produce it. We could say, we've paid for it. We will charge you a small fee for the rights to manufacture it. And then anyone who wants to go and manufacture it and meet the requirements can go and do that. We've seen so many corporations use federally funded research, turn that into drugs that they then get a lock on. And not only do they get a lock on for, say, a limited amount of time, but they'll use evergreen patents. They'll change some little bit in the formulation. They'll merge two drugs together and reformulate and then say, oh, well, we should have a new patent on that. That's bullshit. Can I use that word here?
I believe so. I believe so. I haven't been banned yet for swearing.
All right. We shouldn't do that. There's no reason that our money should be used to line the pockets of corporations. If we're paying for it, then we should reap the rewards in terms of cheaper drug costs and by making it available to companies in the United States and potentially throughout the world to be able to manufacture these drugs that are vital and are needed to save people's lives. It's still amazing to me that insulin is not available widely. Literally, people will die if they don't get insulin. It should be cheap and plentiful, and the government has to make sure that that is the way things are, both to save on healthcare costs, but more importantly, to save people's lives.
Yeah. And I would be remiss if I were not to also mention recently the move of Mickey Mouse, into the public domain very recently. So, on the patent front, you see companies patenting life-saving drugs. And then on the copyright front, I just feel like it's so restrictive of our culture that this thing that has existed since so long that no one involved in coming up with them, no one involved in the creation of the character Mickey Mouse is remotely alive. And yet we're just seeing the first tiny chunk of his existence entering into the public domain now.
Absolutely. I mean, we at the beginning of this year when Steamboat Willie joined the public domain, along with some other cartoons and many other noteworthy works that were created in the 1920s and are now available for people to, if it's a musical composition, they can now go and use that without having to pay anyone, which is what the public domain is for. When people go and they talk about intellectual privilege laws and copyright, we should give a monopoly to this person and encourage them to create works. But by extending the term of copyright, as we have done for many years, the most recent one being the Sonny Bono Act, the Disney Monopoly, the Mickey Mouse Monopoly Act. By doing that, we have stolen from our shared cultural heritage. We've stolen from the public domain. And that has prevented other people from creating works of art. Several years back, Winnie the Pooh joined the public domain, and we saw, we works that people had done in parody, because parody's one of the, that is protected speech, which is ironic. You can't go and make a homage or a fan film of a work that you love, but you can parody the heck out of it. Um, and that's the parody is protected, but your fan film in support of some cultural work that's under copyright, that's not supported. And so now Winnie the Pooh is available for people to go and use. Sherlock Holmes with the very litigious, Holmes family, that those works are now no longer protected under copyright, and people can now use those and create works without fear that someone's going to come after them with their lawyers and shut them down. And that's free speech is about people speaking, and we gave the through the Constitution and through the enabling laws, we have ostensibly encouraged people to create works because they get a limited amount of time in which to reap the rewards. But we found that largely after 20 years, you're not going to see, most works aren't going to see rewards in any way. People don't care. There are so many works that are out there that people have just fallen away. And by extending the term to life of the author, plus 70, if I recall correctly, then we have fundamentally locked down works that people can't go and reform into new works. We've harmed the First Amendment by doing this. And we've also harmed our cultural heritage because there are films, for example, that because of the term of copyright and because we don't necessarily know either we don't know who owns it, so no one wants to take it, digitize it, or we don't, or the copyright owner, there's no value in them digitizing it and making it available. We're losing old film stock that will just that has fallen apart. And so we've lost those works because we can no longer digitize them. They've fallen to dust.
I've
And
heard.
so that is part of our shared heritage that is in essence gone, and we won't see again.
Hmm. And I've heard people involved in like archivistry talk about how I think a lot of people, their theory was that now that the internet exists and now that everything is online, people will say you put something online and it's there forever. But a lot of people involved in archivistry know that in the age of the internet, partly because of this copyright, it's harder than ever to archive because there's so much to archive, and I think this would be a great way to help archivists out with doing history so that we don't enter, as they've termed it, a new dark age, where our historical records won't be kept, just as they weren't in the dark age.
I mean, the Internet Archive has done fabulous work, um, archiving and saving the internet. I mean, I know, I'm sure you've been on the internet a while. I've been on the internet for decades, and there are sites that don't exist anymore. Maybe the person who was running it died. Maybe they got bored and didn't want to support it. Domains. Like I had a friend of mine from many years back died a while ago, and for whatever reason, I had my rich site summary tool that I use to just pull down whenever there's something new for the sites that I care about. Um, I had her site there, and I had just left it in years ago when she was still alive. And suddenly there was a lot of stuff that popped up, but it was all someone had bought the domain, set up a website, and then was just sticking SEO, search engine optimization spam up there. And suddenly that popped up. which is, it's a way of reminding me who she was. But her site doesn't exist anymore. I can go to the Internet Archive. I can go to the Wayback Machine and I can find her site there, but also all that SEO spam is logged there as well. But, sites like the Internet Archive, like the Pirate Bay, they the copyright industry, the copyright monopolists will go after it. I mean, the Internet Archive is being sued by various book publishers because the Internet Archive is trying to digitize many works and make them available to people so that we don't lose them. And so that people who can't, spend enormous sums to get a book are able to access those and read them, people who are in less developed countries, for example. And so they're protecting our culture, but these copyright monopolists, if they don't see dollar signs, they don't care. And so they just want to go and shut down anyone who's like a library, keeping our culture available for people.
I should note also that while personally I'm more on the intellectual property abolitionist side of things, I believe the Pirate Party as an organization has a fairly moderate stance, like a reasonable stance on intellectual property that maybe more people can get behind. They're sort of, if I understand correctly, more like intellectual property minimalists might be a better word, right? They want a reduction in copyright, but not abolition of copyright. Is that correct?
To some degree. I mean, certainly so in terms of patents, I think it's pretty uniform across pirate parties that we don't believe patents are useful at all at this point. It's telling. I'm in the I work in the software industry, and the Supreme Court allowed software patents, which are in essence patents on math, which should not be patentable. Um, but they allow software patents and, software engineers. So the patent system was set up so that if someone came up with a new method to make a product, for example, or a new innovation for a steam engine, for example, that they could document it and they would get the exclusive use of that process, provided they documented it. And so in that way, everyone could go and learn from what they were doing, but they get a limited time that they could use that process without competition. And so in that sense, it could be potentially useful if you've got a physical, tangible process. But when you've got math, where, for example, a dating site can go and create a patent of, here is our algorithm for how we match people up. I mean, it's just, here are the weights for different factors that we care about. That's just math. And so software engineers, it doesn't make sense for us to look at those patents, because as soon as we look at those patents, if we even if we're found to infringe on them, then by looking at them, the damages that we as individuals and that the corporations that we work for, simply by looking at it, the damages increase several factors. I believe it's a factor of 3. And so it doesn't make sense for any software engineer to go and look at those patents when they create something new.
Mm.
And then to top it off, because we have software patents, there are literally companies where they're lawyers, and all they'll do is they'll write down, oh, I want to take this process and add internet and I will patent it. You know, and so what is that exactly? There's nothing innovative about it. But the patent office will go and they'll allow those patents. And indeed, there are even efforts where the patent office looks and says, you know, there's prior art to that, or this is just obvious. We're not going to grant you a patent on that. There are efforts to change the laws to to say that they can't, the patent office has to grant the patent. They cannot look, they cannot look and say, oh, this is obvious. You know, you really shouldn't get a patent on that. No, you have to grant the patent.
So they're even
And
trying
so
to remove common sense as a barrier to their system.
exactly, you know, they want to turn out the maximum number of BS patents that you could possibly see, which is just fuel for then someone comes along, these patent trolls, and they say, "Oh, you have somehow infringed on this patent." Maybe it was a patent that they bought from someone else because the person who came up with the patent never could use it to create a useful product, and now it's in some patent trolls cache of patents that they're going to use as a bludgeon to go and get money from people who are actually doing innovation. So from our standpoint, patents shouldn't exist. They're useless at this point. They just stifle innovation. When someone can go and take a buy the product, uh, get the software out of it, reverse engineer it, and figure it out, what's the point of the patent? It's not really telling us anything. So so for patents, we would agree, just eliminate them. In terms of copyright, you know, it used to be that it was a term of copyright was 14 years. You would you have to go and file an application. So here's a book. I want copyright on it. You would get it for 14 years. And then after the end of the 14 years, or before the end of the 14 years, you could renew it for another 14 years. And as Cory Doctorow has pointed out, this is useful if you're an author. You go to a publisher, you're like, okay, I've got a patent on this. And they're like, all right, great. Sure, we'll publish that for you. And here's the contract, you know, you've never sold anything, and they give you an awful contract. But if that book is popular, come the end of copyrighted 14 years, you can go and say, as the author, oh, look, we had a contract that lasted for 14 years that was horrendous for me, and you made all this money off of it. I'm going to extend the term of copyright for another 14 years, but unless you give me a better deal, I'm going to go to someone else who will. And so in that way, that gives authors power. As I said, you know, but even then, if you go back and look at it, most works were not renewed for 14 years. They just weren't economically viable. So it didn't make sense for the author to go and do that. But where it made sense, it was advantageous to the author. So our current position is copyright would last 14 years, except in a physical. So if you had a physical, tangible book, okay, you got that for 14 years. But if it's a digital book, you only got 5 years.
Okay.
Because that covers it. And, you know, as I said, it's life of the author plus 70.
Right. Which is an insane amount of time to I think to anyone. I would hope to anyone, life of the author plus 70 seems intuitively unreasonable.
I mean, how does it makes, I mean, you can't create a work if you're dead. So by saying life of the author plus 70, that is just useless. All you're doing is saying, oh, you're child maybe, or your children's children, or your third cousin, fourth removed, or something like that, is going to be able to benefit from this if you're in the 1% of all authors that actually have um, a successful work. We look at movies, and as I mentioned, we've lost so many silent movies because it wasn't economical to digitize it or to even create new film versions of that particular work. And so, or we have some portions of some films, but we've lost other portions because when they redid it, they snipped this and took that and added that, and so we don't have the original work. It doesn't make sense to give someone such a long term. And indeed, we've seen recently with streaming where HBO had works, had films or television shows that people wanted to watch, but it's actually they make more money if they remove that from HBO and instead get a tax deduction, which to me is just ludicrous. My viewpoint is if you remove it and you get a tax deduction, then that means anyone can just file share the heck out of that and share it. You're basically abandoning your property in order to get a tax write-off. If we're giving you the tax write-off, the least we can do is make sure that that film is available for everyone to see, free of charge.
Yeah, one of my favorite shows actually, Infinity Train, was canceled as a result of that exact merger. So in addition to intellectual property, the Pirate Party has some other issues that they focus on, right? One of them is liquid democracy, which anybody who's seen this channel has already seen me talk at least a little bit about liquid democracy. And another big one is privacy rights and government transparency. Could you tell me a little bit about the Pirate Party's stances on those issues?
Sure. So we've always been a group that believes we need the individual members in our society, certainly citizens, but also broadly to people who are here, um, need to have power over the decisions that affect their lives. And so and we need to push decision making as low as we can. We cannot centralize it within Congress. We cannot centralize it within the president. And increasingly, we've seen with Supreme Court decisions, a president who is not bound by the law,
Mhm.
which to me is just amazing and completely counter to the reason people fought to create this country. But anyways, you get a bunch of 6 conservative justices who are willing to pull things out of their ass and use historical evidence when it suits them, but ignore the historical evidence when it doesn't. And just create, as we see with like Fourth Amendment rights and civil asset forfeiture, that's not in the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment is clear. Government can't take your stuff without convicting you of something. But now we've ruled that government can take your stuff simply because your stuff did something. We don't have to prove that the stuff really did something. We can just assert it, and then it's up to you to go and prove that your
Is
stuff didn't do something,
is that a
which is ludicrous on the face of it. But sorry, go on.
is that a privacy issue? Is that related to privacy
I mean,
rights?
that's I mean, in that your stuff is yours and thus your private room to control is that. But to get back to your first point, we believe in pushing things down to individual people, to collective group of people to decide. Massachusetts, for example, has a 200-person legislature made up of 40 state senators, and 160 state representatives. And those are elected in single member districts. And indeed, come election day, the general election, usually it's about 60% of legislators who have no competition in the general election. Some of that is because the Democrats win 90% of the seats, and some of that is because we've set up a system where they can amass large war chests, and it isn't advantageous to challenge them except in the primary. And even then, your chances of challenging them are remote. You know, we're running a candidate in Lowell who's running Joseph Honorowski, who's a state representative, and we're supporting him, and he's a pirate who's running. But we as pirates believe that we need to make decisions collectively, broadly, not limited to a small number of people. And so, you know, where we can use technology to facilitate that, that is something that we believe in fundamentally. And we need to explore most of that. And we internally have gone through different processes for how we make decisions and are coming up with new ways to facilitate that amongst our members. But we also believe fundamentally in a right to individual privacy. And we all take that to be, you know, the government can't go and stick, and the Supreme Court has ruled this, they can't go and stick, the police can't, without a judge's authorization, stick a tracking device on your car. And we believe that. But if you say, but the spy device is built into your car and is connected to the internet, well, now they can go to a third-party broker and buy that data and then be able to go and figure out where you've gone and decide to do this en masse and figure out, oh, well, these people are going to this area that we've identified as a place where drugs are sold. And so we can do what are in essence general warrants, you know, what has been banned by the Constitution. They can do a dragnet and pull in this private data and figure out who are the people they might want to look at, and then go back and launder that data by getting a warrant. Well, we think this person is going to these various locations on such and such a days. Can we go to their mobile phone provider and be able to determine that? Yes, here's a warrant, go do it. So they are able to launder this private data into data that passes constitutional muster. And that's just counter to everything. Just because we have the internet doesn't mean we lose our constitutional rights.
I absolutely agree. And so those are the issues when it comes to privacy for ordinary citizens. I also wanted to know, what is the position on government transparency? What are some of the biggest issues? Because I don't know a lot about that issue in government transparency. What are the biggest things people push for?
Well, Massachusetts is unique of all states in that the executive, the governor, the legislature, and the judiciary are not do not have to abide by freedom of freedom of information laws, or FOIA laws. That means that we can't file a request with the legislature for, well, why is it this particular law was ignored by you? And indeed, committees, Massachusetts legislative committees routinely wait till the last minute to decide whether they're going to support a bill or not. And oftentimes the bill just goes to what is termed to study, and is dead. And we don't know. They don't even have to record their votes so we could know, these set of legislators oppose this bill and these others support it, so that in the next 2-year cycle, we can know who do we need to focus on in order to try and get a particular bill passed. Massachusetts has a legislature where legislators are in essence full-time, except for the summer, especially the summer before elections. And they're full-time and they're paid commensurately. And they're paid much more, of course, if they're in leadership positions, but it's a very top-heavy system where the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate can, in essence, decide, oh, this particular legislation, I don't want to get it passed. And so it doesn't get passed, regardless of whether the majority of the legislature wants it passed. It could be that a committee doesn't, a committee chair wants to make sure a piece of legislation is passed, but it goes against leadership, other members of the leadership. And so if they vote it out, pressure will be put to make sure that that legislation doesn't get passed, or they could lose their committee chair position and instead be relegated to the basement of the legislature or the attic of the legislature. And so in that way, limited number of people exert a disproportionate power over the legislature. And so freedom of information laws would help us to open that up, where we could get more access to how these decisions are made, and people can make their case that, well, this speaker, we need to get rid of them. That's the democratic process. And so we fundamentally in Massachusetts don't have that power. There was in the last few years, there were changes that the legislature put through that took certain things away and added additional things, but largely it made public access to knowledge about our government worse than it was. And Massachusetts is already pretty far down there.
So, in addition to the issues we've talked about so far, right? We've talked a bit about intellectual property, we've talked a bit about transparency, privacy, and liquid democracy. I do want to note that the Pirate Party's platform is fairly, it's ambivalent on most partisan divides, right? You can be a party and be left wing on, or pro-choice, and you can be a pirate and also be pro-life, right? The Pirate Party doesn't have a stance on most partisan issues. Is that correct?
I mean, correct. That's not correct for Massachusetts. I mean, we've got a long list of positions, certainly defending your privacy, digital freedom for everyone, elections and voting, are three primary ones, but we want to make sure there's education for everyone. We believe healthcare is a human right. We believe that freedom for future generations requires a sustainable and livable future. People need to have a right to secure livelihood. Reproductive freedom is a human right. We believe in ending the drug war. We don't believe in xenophobia. And sex worker rights are worker rights. So there's a long list of positions that are in our platform that we've broadened over the years, to one that focuses on the individual, and the individual being able to maximize and live their best life. We don't have a system like that in the United States. We've got a system where a small number of people are extremely wealthy and they can basically control our economic lives, and we get very little say in that. And so we don't believe as pirates, taking inspiration from the pirates in the 17 and 1800s, who would democratically elect their leaders, where the captain, everyone got a share, and the captain got a two times share, and the quartermaster got 1.5 share, where they had to live by their wits, on the high seas, skirting these very authoritarian, um, you know, generally king controlled states that would throw them in shackles. We see that as an inspiration, and we believe that collectively we are all in this together and no one should be left behind.
Okay, it sounds like in Massachusetts specifically, at least, the party's a bit more top down than I thought it was. I thought it was maybe more minimalist in terms of the number of issues you actually had to commit to in order to be a pirate. Is that, you said Massachusetts, is that the case with pirate parties in general? Are they usually sort of also progressive parties, or are they just focused on the pirate issues?
Yeah, I don't like to use the term progressive because I feel like that doesn't really mean anything, unless you're talking about the Progressive Party back in the early 20th century, I suppose. I suppose that kind of meant something. But, you know, we believe in making, look, people need to have control over the decisions that affect their lives. And we cannot have a strong and vibrant economy or people who are living their best lives if they're under the thumb of someone who's got vastly more wealth than them, if they have to worry about whether they're going to be able to get health care, if they can't find a roof over their head. you know we look, pirate parties in Europe, for example, where they are countries that have solid safety nets, um, that helps them. And we are so far away from that. We're very much that, we have large numbers of people, who are trying to eliminate our social safety nets, who want to privatize or even destroy our libraries. Democrats and Republicans. Just look at New York City, where they're maximizing the amount of money they can give to the police while cutting back on it for libraries that serve everyone. And so, we believe there's a floor under which no one should fall. And that, and we cannot, it's good to say we want to make sure that people are innovative and the patent laws are harming that innovation and we need to get rid of it. But if people fear where their next paycheck is going to come from, then they can't go and create new businesses. If there's a minimum floor under which, uh, they will not fall, and that allows them to provide for themselves, for their families, for their kids, there's education for everyone, there's healthcare for everyone. No one fear that they're going to be out on the street, then they can take risks and build new businesses and be innovative. But if we're going to jettison all of that, then it's basically we're letting the rich dictate the terms of everyone else's existence. And that's not what the pirates are for. We believe in individual liberation. You can't have individual liberation if we're beholden to the whims of a wealthy small set of people.
Okay, so the note I was going to sort of try to end this conversation on was going to be maybe I would like to start a chapter in New Hampshire because I know that you're the nearest by in Massachusetts. And one thing I've been trying to do recently with this channel is talk to as many different third parties as possible. I've been talking to libertarians, I've been talking to American Solidarity Party, been talking to multiple groups with kind of a diverse range of beliefs. and I'm hoping to kind of build a pretty broad audience with the channel here. And I
Mhm.
wanted to put it out there to people, anybody watching, if I could get even just 4 other people who wanted to start a chapter with me. Now I'm wondering also, if I have put out that message and I want to start a pirate party chapter in New Hampshire, would I be obligated by the party to support all of those other issues that you're talking about? Or could I have a more minimalist platform for here in New Hampshire to invite in maybe more libertarians to join up?
Sure. I mean, first off, Massachusetts and New Hampshire are different states, and we in Massachusetts cannot dictate to pirates in New Hampshire or pirates in any state what they should do. We have expanded our, originally we had our core issues of privacy, patent reform, um, free speech, copyright reform, and democracy. Those were our core issues, but you know, where we are living now with so many folks on the reactionary right who are quite willing to um, just expel, or seem to be planning to like throw people in camps who aren't from this country and just expel them. I mean, we've seen that in the history, from the 50s with Operation Wetback, and you can go look it up, where people were literally rounded up and sent to Mexico, even if they were US citizens. So we know things like that can happen here now, and we know there are folks who are trying to do that. But we're not going to dictate what pirates in other states do. These are things that, in light of how uh, technology has changed, but also how the country has changed in terms of the erosion of things that we saw as economic liberties and as people's ability to control things is getting whittled away. We felt the need to broaden our platform into other areas and say, none shall pass. This is what we believe needs to be done. But at the same time, even in Massachusetts, we have a three pirates rule, and that came from the Swedish pirates. If three pirates get together and they decide this is what they want to do, then go off and do it. We're not going to tell you how to advance how to advance our issues, or how you should raise your Jolly Roger, or raise your pirate banner. But we're going to suggest things, and we will have that conversation. Ultimately, we are all pirates. We don't want to expel anyone. And, it's certainly Massachusetts, we have had people who are just out on, out on a limb, who were doing things that were counterproductive, getting into fights and getting into arguments for no good means. And so, in a way to protect everyone else, we've had to ask them to leave. And that's happened at the US Pirate Party level. But, where people are willing to work with us, we want to work with them, and that's, many different, as our Joe Honorowski, I think, would say, and paraphrasing him, we have a diversity of perspectives, and we need to listen to one another and talk those things through, not have a rigid way of approaching things. But we also believe in individuals being able to maximize who they are and to maximize their rights. And so part of those rights are economic rights. And so we're not going to shy away from that, but we're also willing to have a discussion.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably a great note to end things on, is you're a party that's about all of these things and more. And I would love if anybody in the audience is interested in starting a New Hampshire party. Sounds like they have a three pirate rule. Anybody wants to join my pirate crew, let me know in the comments below. And you have a nice day, Mr.
Thank you
O'Keefe.
very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. It was a pleasure. And I wish you, if you please go and, when this is done, share it out, and we'll happy to share out your other, your other recordings as well, to make sure people find out more about the work that you're doing and the issues that you're trying to highlight.
Thank you.